Psst, check out my Patreon. Do I have to do this? Can I please just say it's bad and move on to the next one? No, I gotta review it. My channel wouldn't be complete if I didn't. Oh, the things I do for completionist's sake. Alright then, let's get this over with. Can't Buy Love is our second romance story here in season 3, and this time around it's not about a teacher who's fallen in love with somebody, but rather a student. One who you probably wouldn't expect. It's not Blossom and Jared, thank God, but rather Princess Morbucks, who randomly has a thing for Barry Mackerbacker. I don't know, I think the show's used both pronunciations at one point or another. But yep, I'm sure you can already tell how fantastic this episode is, as if the tone of my voice didn't already give it away. Don't ask me why, don't ask me how. I don't have any explanation other than love works in mysterious ways, but I want you all to keep in mind that these characters are supposed to be 6 years old, okay? Barry and Princess are assumed to be first graders here. 6-year-old first graders. That is a key aspect as to why this episode misses the mark, but you'll see what I mean as the plot unfolds. Let's go.
Ooh. That's for saying I cheated at kickball. Dude, you did cheat! Obviously.
The episode begins with a playground fight between the Powerpuff Girls and Princess's Cash Money crew, who are arguing over a kickball match in which Princess must have cheated at somehow. On the bright side, this is the first time we see Princess in her original power suit since Super Sweet 6. Wow, that's a lot of S's. It's kinda sad how rarely we get to see her in her original costume design, but then again, everything from the original got shafted in favor of inferior design choices thanks to neglectful decision making. Not that this suit does her any good, because pretty soon she gets sent flying and crashes right into Barry's recently baked Roswell cupcakes, which he worked really hard on and is super upset about them being obliterated. Princess, on the other hand, seems to have interpreted what he said a little differently.
Hey, cupcake.
Cupcake. Say it again.
My cupcakes!
I don't really know what she sees in him, considering these characters have like zero chemistry because they've barely spoken to each other in this series at all and have literally nothing in common. Although this is clearly more of a fictitious love at first sight situation than a long-term admiring from afar. So all in all, I have zero interest in this idea because these two characters have never really interacted before. It's like Jared and Blossom all over again, except less egregious because this plays more onto the love at first sight idea that I just mentioned, whereas Snow Month kinda implied Blossom and Jared knew each other prior to the events of the episode, and yet we never got to see that. The way that Blossom reacts in her situation leads me to infer that these feelings weren't spontaneous, they had already formed off-screen sometime prior to this episode, whereas Princess' reaction here shows that she's never met Barry before. Although, at the same time, this love at first sight dynamic doesn't really work because this isn't the first time Princess has run into Barry. Technically, the first time we see both characters in the same setting, it's in Presidential Punch-Out, where Barry is announcing the debate wrestling match while Princess partakes in the actual fight.
Looks like Morbucks is down for the count!
However, it's unclear if the competitors can actually hear the commentators, and I could see people arguing that these two never directly spoke to each other, so it is entirely possible that they missed each other. So then there's Super Sweet 6, in which Princess sent out invitations to everybody in town except Blossom. This kind of implies that she directly addressed an invitation to Barry, meaning she had to have known who he was in order for him to receive an invitation. Of course, it is also possible she programmed her drones just to specifically not invite Blossom, but give an invite to anybody else that they see, but then that ties back into the immense oversights present in her plot that I brought up during that review. But okay, let's say neither of those two interactions count as these characters meeting face to face. Now what? Well, some may want to bring up that Barry dumped Punch on her in The Secret Life of Blossom, but I don't think that should count because that was a fantasy sequence that took place in Blossom's head. Instead, I want to look back to Treble Clef, an episode I just reviewed 2 videos ago.
Someone's been getting her facts wrong again. I never get my facts wrong.
Not according to this Slam and Jam!
I find it odd that Princess and Barry were in the same room together right here, and yet she has no reaction to him. The only excuse this could possibly have would be that the episodes aired out of order, which is plausible. Although, given the outcome of this episode, it's extremely odd that Princess wouldn't have a reaction to seeing him again during that moment. So really, no matter which of these two episodes came first, there's a noticeable break in continuity. And before a counter-argument is made that this show doesn't care about continuity, Treble Clef went out of its way to acknowledge that Porbucks took place before it, so as a matter of fact, this show does care about its continuity. At least enough to subtly tie in episodes with other episodes. The same thing happened with Somewhere Over the Swing Set and Painbow, as well as the Silico episodes and the Bliss appearances. Maybe if there was a situation where Barry saved her from something and she interprets it as though he's being this super noble gentleman, that would work, but just landing in his arms doesn't really warrant this sudden affection. Oh, and get used to seeing those fantasy sequences, by the way, because Princess does it like 4 times in this episode. The song that plays in the background during these moments is also an obvious sound-alike to Careless Whisper, in case you couldn't already tell.
Are you okay, lady?
She doesn't get to talk to him for very long, however, because Miss Keen barges through the door demanding to know what's going on, and Princess's crew bails her out of there before she can get his name so that they don't get caught, causing her some distress that lasts until later that night. Meanwhile, the girls asked Barry about what happened, but he seems way more concerned over his cupcakes being ruined than whatever Princess was blabbering on about. Several hours pass and we meet back up with Princess, who is looking Barry up in her yearbook, which only serves as an excuse to pull us into another one of her fantasizing sequences. Ugh, sitting through this is agony. By the way, why the hell do these 6-year-olds have a yearbook? If they're supposedly in their first year of elementary school as established by the Wrinklegruff gals, why do they have a yearbook? Maybe some elementary schools do that. I mean, mine never did, aside from 5th grade, which was the final year before middle school, but that's not the point. Yearbooks are handed out at the end of the year. Why would Princess have this for their school unless they were in another year of school? Well, see, that could be possible, considering A Star is Blossom implies several years have passed with all of the school plays that Blossom was a part of, but then how is Princess still only 6 years old? Or are we really supposed to believe that she's 11 now? I mean, we do at least have more confirmation that this is an elementary school that for some reason has lockers and high school students and young kids that take honors freaking math at the ripe young age of 6 years old. Speaking of contradictions, this yearbook also shows that Barry and the girls are the only characters in this show to have proper first and last names. And what's this? The girls have the last name of Utonium? Huh. Looks like just another confirmation that the show was trying to save face from season 1's Powerpuff blunder. Love those stock poses, by the way.
Blossom Powerpuff, bedtime columnist.
Sloppy. If I could sum up the entire Powerpuff reboot in one word, the word I would use is sloppy. No word describes this show better than that one. Alright, I'm fast forwarding to the next day, where the girls are seen standing in line for lunch together when suddenly a butler appears out of nowhere and invites Barry to dine at the Cool Kids table. And by Cool Kids table, I mean with Princess and nobody else. As I'm sure you can guess, this is a romantic setup attempt for Princess to ask Barry to go out with her. But Barry is completely unaware of this and more fascinated by the fact that their table has a shirt.
Cool! This table's got a shirt!
And that his napkin is a swan.
Hey, my napkin is a swan!
Sure enough, her attempt to woo Barry is a failure and the lunch bell rings, cutting their time short yet again and leaving Princess to sulk alone because she missed out on yet another opportunity. Yo, question, Princess is 6, right? Are 6-year-olds really looking to go on fancy dinner dates with the boy/girl of their dreams and hoping to get all romantic-like with each other? This doesn't feel like an accurate depiction of a 6-year-old's crush. This is like preteen to teen shit. I digress. Later that day in Princess's club room, which, by the way, is another example of expressing continuity in the show because the banner is a direct reference to the exact same one that appeared in Presidential Punch-Out. I just wanted to point that out to further support my argument. Now, Princess asks her crew for advice, and they basically just tell her not to bottle up her feelings because it won't do her any good. So she should go tell him how she truly feels. Just like in Spider-Man 2.
Pizza time.
And she plans to do just that, but walks in on an awkward scene that leaves her heart ultimately shattered.
Well, see you tonight?
Yeah!
Ah yes, the most cliche melodramatic plot point of conflict known to man. The simple misunderstanding.
Oh yeah! Cupcakes! Cupcakes!
This isn't the first time the show has done this either, which makes it even more sad. Regardless, Princess has another vision where she imagines Blossom intervening as this evil siren who's bent on keeping him all to herself in an exaggerated hallucination. Ergo, Princess vows to get revenge on Blossom for stealing her man away and tosses her yearbook into the fireplace, which, by the way, shows that each of the girls' photos have changed from the stock images that were present there in the prior scene to these new ones. Gotta love those inconsistencies that this show is infamous for having. Next, Princess arrives at her front door to stomp her into the ground using her fancy new Heartbreaker suit, which, not gonna lie, looks very weird and off-putting. I mean, it's not a bad thing for her to have this battle suit because it leads to some cool action and stuff, but it just makes Princess look like she's way older than what she actually is, and that becomes distracting pretty quickly. I don't know, there's just a huge disconnect for me when looking at this fight. It's like all of a sudden she's become a teenager or something, which actually is pretty fitting for the age group that this episode's plot is more geared towards to begin with, because this is completely unfitting for elementary schoolers. Oh, and if you're wondering where Bubbles and Buttercup went, they're conveniently out at the store buying groceries for the cupcakes. Not gonna lie, that was pretty cool, but Blossom didn't even give an effort to dodge that. In busts Barry, who witnesses Blossom getting eviscerated with Princess's laser weapon as he rushes to see if she's okay so that the two of them can continue making those cupcakes. But of course, because Princess is an utter dolt who lacks self-awareness, she interprets this as Barry personally liking Blossom more, so she lets them go scot-free. And you know, that's fine and all, but literally no one other than Princess knows what's going on here, so it's not like this has any effect on Blossom or Barry or the other two Powerpuffs or even the audience. This actually brings our story to a close, and Princess has one last imagined fantasy in which she lets Barry go in order to accept that it's not meant to be, while the Powerpuff Girls go back inside and make some badass cupcakes with the real Barry. All in all, the only thing I like about Can't Buy Love is Barry. He's completely oblivious to this nonsense, as he should be, because everything just boils down to Princess being this super over-dramatic love-struck fool who reads way too deep into everything. This isn't something that really belongs in a Powerpuff Girls episode as the focus. Romance isn't what this show is about, and it never was, and it never should be. I don't know how many freaking times it needs to be brought up, but the reboot insists on continuing to pump this garbage out. Certainly, it can be present, but it only works as a subtle background element at best, rather than as the main conflict that the episode needs to resolve. That's why Save the Date ended up being so much better than I initially expected, because the relationship wasn't the main character's struggle. It was dealing with the lack of confidence and overcoming the criticisms and insults that others had made towards her. Witnessing episodes about Bliss fall in love with a stranger, or sitting through two primates wanting to get married, or even awkward fantasies between Blossom and Jared, as well as this episode, it's all garbage. Meaningless trash that has nothing remarkable to say. This feels like a terrible soap opera, and even then that's an insult to soap operas. If this show wanted to do a romantic parody episode, then one would have been enough. But none of these are parodies, and it's just too much of the same shit. It's a bad romance episode, and there's nothing more to it. At this point, I'm just glad my review is over so I can move on from this and talk about more exciting episodes again. That said, see you guys next time for an episode that I've got quite a lot to say about. Hope you look forward to it.